in the last session, we touched base on something called as for loop, right? For, and then there was a loop that started. Let's again repeat that for the benefit. So, any question regarding filter or reduce? You want me to repeat again? Anyone? Okay. So let's understand something called as for loop. Okay, so for loop, first, what is the background for usage, right? So there is itab1, there is itab2. Okay, the requirement is that we need to transfer data from itab1 to itab2. Okay. However, we need to change some field data in the process. Okay. It's not that we need to directly just say itab1 is equal to itab2 or itab2 is equal to itab1. Okay. So current syntax, what we do is we do loop itab1 into wa1, and let's say wa1 field 1 is equal to wa1 field 1 into 10. Maybe for some reason we wanted to multiply each field and then transfer that data into append wa1 to tab 2. Okay, somewhere like we do this to do some manipulation and then transfer that data to itab2. Okay, so what happens is, let's say if itab1 is having data like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, itab2 will be into 10, something like this. If we multiply all fields, right? So this is field 1, then simultaneously field 2, field 3, field 4, something like this. So if at all we want to make sure that we are transferring data from left hand side to right hand side, we kind of multiply using the current syntax, using loop, etc. Okay. Now in for loop, what we do is it's an expression. We have item1, item2 is the target, then you have an equal sign, then you have a value operator, you open the bracket for. So then again, when we go back, I'm telling you that we kind of declare a temporary work area within the for loop. So for example, this particular thing, local field symbol item1, you don't have to declare anything outside. Okay, it will be automatically taking the property of this particular source table. Okay, so item1 in, so in is a keyword in item1. Okay, so once you establish that what is your target table, what is your source table, what is your temporary work area, the other things are now based upon your requirement. Okay, so for example, here there are 5 columns, okay, that we are going to transfer. So what we need to do is, as I discussed earlier, for an expression there is always a closing bracket, opening bracket and a closing bracket. Inside this is what we need to do the manipulation. Okay, so I'm going to say field 1 is equal to LFS field 1, LFS item 1 field 1 into 10. So if I expand this, so what we are doing is, this item 1 field 1 is nothing but the field of the table item 1. Okay, And this field 1 is the first column of itab 2. Okay. So what is happening is this is the LFS itab field 1. Okay. This particular thing. And this 10 is nothing but the field 1 which we are giving as a target field. Okay. So similarly, if I want to do field 2, that is equal to LFS let's say 10. Okay. Field 3 is equal to LFS item 1. For this field, maybe I don't want to do any calculations. I'll keep it as it is. Okay. So I'm doing a blind copy as it is. Then for this reason, maybe for this one, now field 4 is equal to LFS item 1 field 4. I'm doing a plus operator, maybe 5. Okay. So 4 plus 5 this becomes 9. So you can do anything you want for each, line. Similarly, I'll just put also 5 is equal to LFS item 1 okay. So this is how you kind of create a for loop where SAP gives a bit of flexibility and you can do some manipulation. So all these are your fields which are in the target table for itab, and all these are the fields that you're going to use from the source table. Okay. So if you can see that this particular constant, this 10, 10, and 10 is same for at least 3 fields. So what happens is SAP is given a flexibility, and I think that we saw in the code also, something called as let. Okay, let x is equal to 3. So it is something that you can give as a constant to be used across your statement. Okay. So if you're using let x equal to 3 and you want to use this x in any of the fields, you need to use something called as in that particular field, and that should be outside the brackets. Okay. This is a syntax. There's no kind of a reason as to why we need to do this. It's kind of a syntax that if at all you want to use a constant that you have defined, for example, let's say this is 3.14, right? Or maybe an integer. So what happens is then you want to use this in your one of your fields. You can use in field is equal to something, and the rest of the field can be as it is. Okay, you can still use this particular thing as well if you don't want to use like this. However, since if you want to use this constant, you need to use let command. Okay, so this is one of the things that is used extensively as well in my experience, and for that I think we need to understand this for loop. Okay, so did we understand this for loop? Any questions on this? Okay, so what happens now is, like for example, this is a first time value assignment to itab 2. Okay, for example, if itab 2 was just declared and there was no value in this is empty, so we need the values to be assigned to this. So we do all this steps to populate the table. But for now, what if we have already got some data, right? We have already got this much data. If you again give a value statement to this, right, it will override this. Your data will go off. It's not like it's similar to like itab 2 is equal to itab 1. Okay. So for the first time, when you put data, all this data will be there. Second time, if you again do this, I tab 2 is equal to, let's say, I tab 3. So whatever data was, we had taken in I tab 1, this will get overwritten by I tab 3, right? So similarly, if you again do this, okay, if you again take this, if you again take this, whatever data was there in this, right, that you have taken, this will get overwritten by the source table I tab 3, okay? Now the question is how to retain the existing data, right? When you do when you do in the current syntax, there's something called as append lines of I tab 3 to I tab 2. Okay, this is how you do it. For example, if already you have got I tab 1 data and you want to append lines, you do something like this in the current syntax. How do we do this in the new syntax? We use something called as base statement. Okay. So base statement, if you see, there's not much difference. It's just that there is value. You don't have to give the data type anymore. The reason is this data type is already there in this, right? This is an already existing table. So the system already knows what is the data type of the target table. You do a value hash and then you use base keyword. Instead of for, there is base statement. Then you tell again which table you're going to append it. Okay. So you are appending the table. So usually this table and this table is the same for the syntax. And then like this, there is open bracket and close bracket. You can just simply give this particular field as it is. Okay. The row. So what will happen is you will not be having a problem where this will get overwritten by this. Okay, you can directly add the values for the next. So what will happen? There's a question that what if I need to do a loop again? Okay, so there is again a statement for that. Maybe I'll show that in the next session where you can still use base statement along with for loop. Okay, because there can be a situation like this, right, where you want to append maybe another table there. Okay, so right now if I have shown, it is that you're doing line by line. So what if I want to append data for, let's say, another table, I tab index 3 here, or let's say 5. If I do this, it will get overwritten, right? So what will happen? And so that I'll show that in the next session, maybe once we are a bit comfortable with the other parts of the new syntax. Okay, so did we understand what is for loop and base statement right now, and why is it used for? That's the main thing. So syntax is something that we can always search and understand, but what is the concept and why we use? Is everyone clear about this? Or any questions? Okay. So next thing, I think what we have done now is that we have kind of covered majority of the new syntax that is used in day-to-day operations. Okay, and we'll give a very brief summary of what all we have done. We have done inline data declaration, where we have seen for both data and field symbol uh, declarations. Then we have done some constructed expressions. One is value statement. Again, value statement is a bit robust kind of or a bit flexible kind of a constructor expression, and you can see that it is used in variety of areas. The latest being the for loop that we saw. Okay, so let's try to practice for value statement whenever possible. Then there is conversion operator where sometimes we require a data conversion from one data type to another data type, and we saw some use cases for that. There is conditional operator. So conditional operator is, I would say, not. It's not that it is replacing completely. It's an alternative to if-else-if statement. So your if-else-if will still work in HANA right now. SAP has not taken it off. But obviously, if SAP has come up with all these statements, there is a chance that if-else-if will get obsolete. You have switch statement. So switch statement is a kind of an alternative for case statement. Then we did some very important operations on internal table. So in the internal table, there are main two types. One is the index search and one is the column criteria where we match the column and take it up. So both the sides we saw even what is try catch exception handling and also how do we add default value. Then there were some common methods that SAP is given for uh, understanding if at all there is some index value that we can take up or if a line exists with the condition, etc. We also saw what is filter and reduce. The use cases as to why filter is required and why reduce is required. Chaining is not new. Chaining we see in a structure as well. So in case if you don't require the entire work area, we can also take the respective field by just extending that using a hyphen. We saw what is corresponding. Now we can do a corresponding for the entire table. Then just now we saw what is for and let operators. So for and let expression is basically used for transferring data from a from a source table to a target table. Okay, then we saw some very common string processing, alpha, concatenation, piping. So here the major ones would be concatenation and piping, okay, where it will be used extensively. Okay, so these were the major ones in terms of new syntaxes. What we'll now go forward is to another section, that is the select queries. Okay, so having learned a lot of new syntax, let's try to now apply those things in the SQL modifications. Okay, so we'll go one by one. There are different variations in the select query, and it all depends upon the way that the developer wants to apply the logic. Okay. Before we start, there are very common things that needs to be there in the new syntax if at all you want to use them in the SQL query. One very important thing is that in the current syntax, you don't separate the fields using comma. Okay, you have a space, for example, select VBLN, Posner, etc. fields from VBAP. What you do is you just simply have a space in between, but in the new syntax, you need to separate those fields using database fields using comma. Okay. The second very most important thing is escape characters. Okay, escape character is nothing but you have an @ symbol associated with the variables that are created in this program itself. Okay, so I'll come back to that using the select query that we have. Okay, so let's start. We'll briefly touch upon these kind of select queries, like a normal select using new syntax, aggregation, arithmetic expressions, even case statements. You can take it up in a select query. So let's start one by one. Let's kind of also uncomment it. Okay, so let me just activate it if everything is okay. Okay, so everyone would be knowing what is SCAR table, right? So SCAR table is nothing but a flight simulator table that SAP is given to do some exercises. There are certain fields. Yeah, so there are certain fields in the table. I've taken 3 fields: car ID, car name, and currency code. So if you can see in the new syntax, you need to separate all these fields by a comma. The second thing is you can see that I have not created any types neither I've done any data. Okay, that is not required anymore. So if you think that you need to do a select query on the fly, you can create a table, okay, internal table which will have the structure of this particular fields by using the word data. Okay, so we have seen that in the inline data declaration in other sections. So here also it is nothing new. You write as it is. There's no change into table, etc. And you add a keyword called data. Okay. Now the change here is that that you need to add something called as @symbol. Okay, associated with those variables in the select query which are not part of this database table. Okay, that is basically a very layman kind of a definition. Uh, for example, char ID is part of scar, char name is part of scar, but this particular variable, it is not part of this database table. That is part of your program. Okay, so that's the reason you will give in the select query for those variables which are not part of the database table. Okay, so we'll see it in a couple of more select queries, and you'll get a bit more comfort in what I'm trying to tell. So there are three things that we saw here. One is a comma. Second thing is the host variable symbol, that is the @. And third thing is you can have an inline data declaration. So what happens is, let's say, you have scar, okay? So scar has other fields as well. So for some reason, maybe after an iteration in UAT, etc., you understand that you need to have maybe currency code is there, but let's say you have URL, okay, that needs to be there from the table. So you can just do a dynamic addition. Automatically, this table will be adjusted internally, and you will get the fourth field also in your internal table. Okay. So now, that's how you kind of benefit with the new syntax for select queries. SAP is also given something called as a demo output class, okay, where you can directly pass this internal table into this particular method display to see your output. Okay, so if I kind of do an output right now, okay, automatically this particular internal table is taken and displayed as an output. So let us be very careful that do not use this in your production environment. This is for your testing only, because sometimes otherwise you need to take a loop and do a lot of either you have to do an ALV and kind of thing. For initial part of it, you can directly use something called as CL demo output. Use the method display and just pass the internal table as it is. Okay. So what will happen is you will get a very good on the spot output with the required field names and also the data in it. Okay. Right now you can see URL is also added. And for some reason, if you don't want URL, you can just simply remove it. Obviously, if URL is used somewhere, then it will give a syntax error. But since I've not used URL anywhere, it will allow me to remove it, and then you'll see that URL is not there. Okay, so this is the most simple format of the new select query. Now let's go to a bit of comparison between old and new. Okay. So this is the old or the current syntax that you use, where you see there is no comma separator, all right? Then there is no symbol for this particular table, and there is no data statement because we need to always declare the table beforehand, right? You cannot do a declaration in the current syntax like this. So that's how the three things are there. And at the same time, if you see the comparison now, you have different ways, right? For example, you can notice that there is a comma that needs to be there. Then you need to have an for this particular table, and then you need to do a data statement so that your the table can be created inline. Okay. If you activate this should not give an error. Okay, so now the third type is that we can see something called as aggregation. Okay, the aggregation on, to be honest, is not new. Okay, to the new syntax. It's just that we need to understand in the new syntax how this is used. Okay, so if you see again, these are the fields from this particular table called SNWV, SO, and SNWD BPA. These are some demo tables. So these are the fields: BPID, company name, then you have company currency code, and then you are basically trying to sum the gross amount, and then you're renaming that as total gross amount. Okay, so this is how you kind of adjust your new code with the aggregation statement as well. There's nothing new, just that if you see in aggregation, you need to still separate the fields using comma, and then you have your host variable with the @ symbol, and the join condition is as it is. Okay. Let's see if there's any data in this. Yeah. So we did a gross amount. We kind of grouped with these three fields, and then we got a gross amount using the new syntax. So there's not much difference in the new syntax. Just that we need to keep in mind where we have to give @ because this is the internal table that we are using in our program. It is not part of the database table. Then you need to have comma to be separating for the new for the database fields that are there. Okay. Now the next variation is something a bit new and a bit you'll kind of question as to why is it actually required also. Okay, this is something called an existence check. Okay, now what happens is that for some reason, there is a requirement in your program that you just want to understand if that particular row exists in the database. Okay, for example, if in this situation, if this particular sales order is there present in VBAK. Okay, so what you will do is you will do a select single VBLN into LV underscore VBLN, where VBLN is equal to something, and then you do a size abarc check. Okay, that for example, if size abarc is not equal to 0, that means you know that this sales order is not present in that particular table. However, SAP also now in the new syntax gives a very kind of a weird way that you can check in a different way, is that you can do a select single, and then you can also literally tell that this should be part of the data of LV exist, rather than, for example, in the old syntax, what you would do is you would say select single VBLN. Okay, that is how you do in this. But for some reason, I wanted to make my code fancy. I will tell that instead of VBLN, the value of VBLN, you just put this particular thing in my variable LV exists. Okay, so what will be the impact is, if at all this particular VBLN exists in VBAK, the value of LV exists will not be 00010. Okay, the value will be this testing for new syntax. I know again this is something you question as to why is it required or something, but I've seen that somewhere down the line there is some use case for it. For example, what will happen is, if I use this testing for new syntax, you can use this. If LV exists equal to testing for new syntax, then you can do some logic, and you can just say that there is no sales order. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is possible. Okay, going forward, you can actually write a value in NV exist. You can hard code it. You can even put a variable also in this, or you can even put uh, the database variable also in this. For example, either you can put testing, you can put directly this as well, which is the old syntax. Also, yeah. So next version, I'll take it in the next select query. I hope this is understood. This is something that you might not use it in your day-to-day of select queries, but yeah, this is something what you called as an existence check using a different way. Okay, a very important one is something that is good now in the new syntax is arithmetic operations. Okay, so I hope everyone knows what is floor and ceiling, right? For example, if you do a floor for 1.7, it will put it to 1. If you do a ceiling for 1.7, it will go to the next integer. Okay. So similarly, now let's try to understand what is happening in this select query. Okay. In this select query, there is a variable in my program that contains the value 5. Okay, that is used for my discount percentage. Now, what happens is in FNWDSO, there are certain fields, okay, that we want to take up. Okay, so let's try to understand one by one. The first field, what I'm telling the system is that you need to add discount and plus 1, okay, as it is, and rename this field as 2. The column heading should be 2. Okay, so what will be the value of this 2 is discount, which is the value is 5 and plus 1. So 6 will be the value always for the first column of this new table LT result. Okay. Then the second field, what I'm trying to tell the system is there is a field called gross amount, which is there in this particular table, SNWDSO. I want that to be multiplied with my discount. Okay. And that should be the final value and rename that as maybe some other name called red gross discount amount. Then also another operation I'm doing, you just do a ceiling to the gross amount and just rename as field gross amount. Okay. So there are 3 arithmetic operations that I'm doing for the new, for the select query. And I think this is something that we don't use in our day-to-day current syntax, right? So let's try to understand the output and come back again. Okay. So what has happened is you can see I had renamed the first field to 2. So this is your name of the column. Second thing is I told the system that you add discount plus 1. So since the discount was 5, you see the first column is always 6 because it was kind of a fixed value that we are telling. Now the second one is that I have told the system that multiply discount into gross amount. So it has done that multiplication. And in the sealed gross amount, I'm just telling that you round it up to the next value, integer. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just add gross amount. Also in the field. So since this is a new syntax, you can directly add or subtract fields in the internal table. Okay. So let's kind of concentrate this 25867.03, and when you multiply by 5, you get this 25867.03. If you do a ceil function, it is going to the next integer value. Okay. So any questions in this particular arithmetic operator that we do? Did we did? Do you want me to repeat it again? to also now kind of pay attention that where have we put this at the rate. If you can see, gross amount is a part of this table itself, right? So we don't have to tell the system that it is a host variable or a variable from my program. At the same time, this also you don't have to do. But if you see, there are three areas that we have put at the rate. LV discount, because LV discount is a part of my program. Okay, that's the reason I'm putting at the rate. And LV result is also part of my program. That's the reason I'm putting at the rate. Okay, so this is how SAP will distinguish that. Okay, this is something that is part of the program, and that is what the developer has done. It is not something part of the table. Okay, if there are no questions, then I'll proceed with the next variation.
Sumit,
Yeah.
Divijay here. Sumit, I have a doubt regarding the above statement, like the existence. So
Okay.
that, yeah, in that case, it is similar like LV underscore exist is equal to testing for new syntax, right?
Yeah. So what will happen is, let's say if there is a VBLM in VBAK with this value, so what will happen is then LV exist will have this value, testing for new syntax. Okay. If at all, let's say VBLM is not having this, sorry, VBAK is not having this sales order. So this will be empty. This will not have any value. Okay, LV exist.
Okay, suppose my requirement is, suppose I want to check whether that document is cancelled or not, but I don't know the field where it is like saving whether that document is cancelled or not. So is it possible to select like select single whether it is cancelled or not? That's that value from.
We
Is it possible?
compare the value of the field in, for example, I get your point. So let's go to VBAK. In VBAK, the cancellation flag might be there in any of the field, right? For example, in any of the 135 field. But right now you do not know where it fits, right? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to say select single, let's say cancel. Let's select single cancel and just simply say that, okay, wherever it is, just tell us if it is. So unfortunately, this does not work like this. It is not going to check all the fields of VBAK. It will only check what is there in your where condition. Okay. So in the where condition, you say VBLN is equal to something. So what it does is, if size above C is equal to 0, that means if there is something available, it is just simply passing this value. Okay.
Okay.
This value to this particular LV exists.
Okay, so if it
if
exists,
there is no
then it will
value
display value
which is existing in VBLN, then LV exists will be empty. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll just do a debug. To this. Before, let's just check what are all the values in VBAK. There are no values right now. Okay. So what will happen is this particular LV exist will have no value inside it. Okay. So LV exists as having no value. The reason is we had a size of C4. There is no value in VBAK which is having this particular condition. Okay. But for some reason, if there was a condition satisfied, then LV exist will have this particular value in it. Okay. And like I told, this is something that is not that useful, but it is possible. It's important that you understand that this is possible.
Okay.
The reason is, if you go to the next thing, I'm telling that this particular value should always be there in this. So every time this 6 is coming as my first column. So it's up to you how to manipulate it.
Okay.
So So next version is something called as concatenation. Okay, so concatenation is something very useful in terms of my experience. Where sometimes you need to manipulate your internal table fields in a way that it can have certain extra values associated with the field values. So here, let's try to understand what has happened. So VBLN is a field of VBAP. Okay. And now you know that this is what? This is a concatenation operator in the new syntax. So what we are telling the system is that you concatenate VBLN with this particular symbol or particular constant or a string, that is open brackets. Again, concatenate the material field of this particular table. Then concatenate the closing brackets. Then concatenate one. Okay. And rename it as company name. Also, the second field should be just having a value just 2. Okay. And just say that company surname. Okay. So obviously right now I think this does not have that value. So let's try to go with some other field, table, maybe SNWDSO. Okay, there is a lot of junk values. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to understand with this particular table. I take life cycle status, billing status. Okay, let's start with this two fields itself. SO ID is there and what is this field? Yes, life cycle. Life cycle underscore status. Let me just going to say instead of so underscore ID concatenate with field life cycle status. What we're trying to do is we're saying that you concatenate two fields which are there in the system for SNWDSO, which is sales order ID and the life cycle order or the order life cycle status. I want to concatenate both together along with certain brackets and number and all that. And then just put it as company name. I just say it sales order advanced. Maybe I'll just put it as that particular name. Let's see what will be the output of this. Okay. So you saw what happened now here is that this is the field from SO underscore ID. Then we had concatenate open brackets. Then again the second field concatenated the closing brackets and the number one. All that is now inside the first field, and I had renamed this as advanced SO. Okay. And similarly, the second field I had just put as 2 and in inverted quotes, single quotes, and that I wanted to rename it as company underscore surname. So indirectly, there are two fields of this particular table, LT underscore result, and which I have concatenated the first field, and second one I have just put it as it is, just to give you an understanding what are the different possibilities. So anyone have a doubt? You want me to repeat this? Okay. So this is, the concatenation is something that I found it very useful. You don't have to then waste the time in internal table and do a lot of loops and do some kind of um, concatenation. The next variation is also very new and kind of I liked it, where you have a case statement within the select query itself. Okay, so let's understand what do you mean by case statement here. Okay, so let me just first execute this. So if you see on the left hand side, there is the field char ID. Char ID is nothing but the database table field. Okay, so this is an actual field in the table SPFLI, and this is the custom field that I created. So what my requirement is that I want the system to mark in the new field if, let's say, when the char ID is AA, I want to have new syntax in the new field. Okay, that is the value that should be there in delivery status log. If the value of char ID is D, then I want to make it as non-empty. Okay, the value of delivery status will be long. Or if it is something else, like for example, if it is not AA or not D, I want the same value which is there in char ID to be put into delivery status long. Okay, this is very useful because what happens is sometimes you kind of have a lot of decisions to make in an internal table, that if this is there, so you need to take another value. If this is the value, then you need to do some other value kind of thing. So directly you can take it in the select query itself. And when you do an execution to this, you have char ID. And if you can see, what I've told the system is wherever there was AA, you put as new syntax. Wherever it is not AA or not D, directly copy the same value, char ID, into the new field as well. So let's say, let us take AF. Okay, AF is also there. So you can see that it kind of compared that particular variable, and then it gave the new syntax with the value for the custom field that we had given. Okay. So any questions regarding case statement inside the select query and why this is used for? Okay. So in technical terms, this is called as simple case. Okay, where we are just comparing one single value to your select query. Now, for some reason, you need to have a case where you need to have a range to be compared. For example, in this particular select query example, we have that there is a field called gross amount. Okay, in this particular table. So I'm telling the system wherever the gross amount is greater than 1,000, mark it as high volume sales order in the column next to it. Okay, so this is the sales order. Maybe I'll put gross amount as well. Okay, so there is sales order ID, there is gross amount, and then we're telling the system that if the gross amount is greater than 1,000, just put it as high volume sales order. Okay, and what in which column? There's a column that we have created which is known as volume order. Okay, obviously the spelling is not correct. Okay, so now let's try to execute this. Okay, so if you can see, let's try to see the first column. This is the sales order as it is. Okay, and this is also gross amount, which is also as it is from the table. Now, what if we have given a comparison operator is wherever it is greater than 1,000, okay, the value is greater than 1,000, I want this to be written as high volume sales order. Since we have not given any other condition, so wherever this condition is filling, it is blank. Okay, so obviously what we can do is we can say else. You can see that in those conditions it is written as low volume. And what happens is this particular column, volume underscore order, now becomes part of your structure of this table. Okay, so this can be used as a normal field, like how you are going to use SOID. This volume underscore order can also become your field of empty search space. So tomorrow, if you want to do a read table where volume order is equal to low, you can use this. Okay, so this it helps you kind of avoid the internal table operations also. You can directly put it at the database level itself. Okay. Any questions in terms of what is search case or simple case, etc.?
Hello, Sumit.
Yeah.
I have a doubt, like not in reference to any of these cases, but in general, when you're writing the query, I've observed that the select query works when we are writing select fields into table from table name rather than writing from table name and into table. So is there a difference like in performance or anything by writing like that? Why does it accept that too?
Yeah, to be honest, in the new syntax, the compiler is a bit strict now, and because of this inline data declaration, etc., the SAP system needs to understand from which table you're taking all these things. Okay, so if you put into before, SAP will not know from which table you're taking. Okay, so that's why even if let's say you're trying to migrate a code to SAP HANA, or if you're trying to check, it will give you a warning, or at some point it will also give you an error that this particular you are put into first and not from. Okay, so in the new syntax it is important that you put from before and then into table later, right? So that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Sumit.
Hi.
Yeah, there is some noise from
The last part of it. So now I hope that question was answered, right? In terms of what is the order of from and into.
Yes, that is clear now. I was actually thinking the other way around. Like I thought into table is the newer syntax rather than from, using from first.
Okay. The reason is because of this, because since you're doing an inline data declaration, SAP needs to understand as to from where exactly are you taking those values. Okay. So, you will kind of see an error also when you try to activate it. So let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the next one is something called as coalesce. This is also a very useful, operator where, uh, for example, let's say you have a table in which there are two similar fields. Let's say you have this, I think BSTKD. Okay, there is one field and something called as BSTKD underscore E. I think this was there in VBFA or some table. I don't remember. Okay, it will have the PO number which you see in SO sales order, right? In BS01, there's something that you write. So what happens is sometimes in different customers, either BSTKD is used in that particular table or BSTKD underscore E is used for that. It's either or. Okay. So sometimes what happens is that if for your particular select query, you can't do a if else right at the runtime. You have to take both the fields together, and then during your loop, you need to check. Okay, if this field is not there, then take it from that field. In this particular scenario with coalesce, the advantage of coalesce is that you can compare two fields or three fields, etc. at runtime. Okay, so let's see the select query. My requirement is that I want to compare gross amount and this head gross amount. Okay, one is SO, the other one is a different table. And I'm telling that out of this two, if there is no value in gross amount, then you pick that value from this particular table field and you put it into expected amount. Okay, I don't want both. The preference will be given to the left hand side, and the second one, the preference, if at all there is no value in SO hyphen gross amount, you take invoice header gross amount. Okay. So I hope we understood the functionality. The functionality is that there is a situation in your program that you require to compare two fields in the same table, and if the first field is not having that value or it is not even having any value, then you take the value from the second compared field. Okay. If there is value, then automatically that for that particular row, it will take this expected amount. Okay. So it is row wise. It's not that it will be the same rule. For this particular row, the value is stored in this. So it will take this particular value. If for the second row, the value is written in the invoice header hyphen gross amount field, it will take that. Okay. So this is what is the use of coalesce. So right now, I don't have values in this particular table, but maybe in the next session or something, I'll show that where you can use coalesce. Okay. But at least I hope you got the idea, right? What exactly coalesce is. I'm just repeating again. It is something that if the left-hand side variable, the field of that table that we are comparing does not have a value, it will use this value as your final value. If if the left-hand side has a value, that same value will be transferred into your column. Okay, so that is the use of coalesce. So we'll wrap it up in, let's say, I guess, 5 minutes. Group by similar, I'll take it up later. Even more important is something called as arithmetic operations, right? So this is a bit more useful. Let's try to cover this first. Okay. So if you can see in this, there are a lot of operations that I've done in the select query, which can be possible. Okay. So in this, the first one, let's try to concentrate on line number 858. So there is a host variable in my program, which is of having value 4. Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to display some set of columns. ID, num1, num2. So there is no @ associated with it. That means these are nothing but the columns of the same table itself. Okay. Now the fourth column, I am renaming it as offset. And what is the value that I am putting it? I am putting the value of the variable that we have used. So always this will be having the same value as 4 for all the rows. Okay. So the fourth column is offset. Now the fifth column, I'm naming it as FUNCT. And what is the value inside it? I'm just putting simply 12, nothing else. So I'm not giving a logical thing right now. I'm just giving you a possibility what can happen. Either you can have the variable you want to put it as the column value, or you can hard code it as the column value. Now you can also do some arithmetic operations. So the arithmetic operations are NUM1, NUM2. You can do a cast operator. What it does is it kind of does a typecasting and it converts the data type of num1 into floating. Okay. So what this is doing is it is doing num1 divided by num2. Okay. And it is kind of giving you a ratio. Okay. What it is. So it gives you 4/5 or what 4.5 or whatever be it. So you are doing a division with using this cast operator. You can also do division like this, division num1 and num2. I hope everyone knows what is a modulus operator. Modulus is that once you divide both the values, the remainder is returned as the value. Even you can do addition and subtraction. So here what I'm doing is I'm adding 4 and I'm also adding the absolute value of the difference. Okay, so absolute value is the value regardless of the sign. For example, -5 and +5, the absolute value of both is 5, right? So what I'm trying to tell to the system is you subtract both the fields, num1 and num2 of each row of the table, and you give the absolute value, and then you add 4 to it. Okay, so that is basically what you're trying to do in the arithmetic operations at the select query level itself. So let's see if there are any values for this. I think there will not be. Yeah. So demo expression it's a table that it is used for practice. Maybe I'll try to take it up with the actual data. But any questions in terms of what all we have done here? Okay. I'll just have maybe one more SQL query and then we can wrap it up. This is something that is kind of a culmination of what all we have learned above. Okay. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to do a case of both simple case where we are comparing one value and also the value of range. Okay. So let's see what we are doing. For this, there is a background that we have created 3 host variables. Okay, the host variable is the variable that we are going to use in the select query from the program. So there is one variable called both_L, another is both_GT, then there's something called as others. The values are 4, 45, 450, etc. So now let's see what we are trying to see. Kind of take the value. We are taking num1, num2 as it is from the table. Now the third column will be named as text. And what we are doing is we are comparing the column ID of the database table. If ID is 1, okay, then what we are trying to do is we are trying to concatenate character 1 and character 2. Now, if you can see, there is no @ associated with these two. That means they are part of the database table. These are the columns of the particular table itself, demo expressions. Okay, so we are basically trying to concatenate them. So if it is 9, if this value of the row of the column ID of demo expression is 9, then I want to do a reverse concatenation. Okay, and if it is of some other value, I want the value which is there in others. Now, if you see there is a @, that means this is one of the variables that you have created in the program, and that you can see at line number 880. So, in short, this text variable will have the value 450 if ID is neither 1 or 9. Okay. So, similarly, if you do a complex construct for case, you're doing a relational operator like less than or greater. So if number 1 of the column of demo expressions is less than 50 and number 2 is also less than 50, I want the value which is there in both underscore L to be put into the column group. So what is both underscore L? You can see that it is with @. So that means it is there in my program itself. I have created a variable. Similarly, if number 1 is greater than 50 and number 2 is greater than 50, I will say both are greater. Okay. So both are greater. Where is the value? The value will be here. So this other group, which is the column that I've created, which will have 45 for those rows where num1 and num2 is greater than 50. If neither of these conditions are satisfied, again, by default, the value which is there in others will be there in group. Okay. So I know this is a bit maybe very new and it might take a bit of time to process this. You want me to explain this once more? Okay. So, I'll stop for the session. I mean, these